top of very important carbon reductions and mitigation actions. With us today are three energetic cities, each with their own unique perspective on their critical climate action tool. This peer-to-peer session on carbon offsetting is part of the webinar series that are being delivered within the UTMC project. In addition to the peer-to-peer, we are also preparing a number of practical implementation guides for cities. Later on, we will give you a few snapshots on the implementation guide on carbon offsetting that we are currently working on, and we would appreciate your feedback on. But let's get back to the agenda, and therefore, before I do that, please note that this session is being recorded, and the recording and the presentations will be shared in the UTMC platform. So maybe next slide, Lena. We will kick this off with an introduction of the UTM. Then we will go over a few highlights from the implementation guide and carbon offsetting. We will then invite our case study cities to present their experiences. And after each presentation, we will invite for you all for a short mini Q&A where we all have a chance to ask our speakers any questions. We will have a lively facilitated discussion, and then we will have the next steps and the conclusion. First, we have Miriam, who will share some highlights on the UTM and what mission is doing and why cities should join the mission. Miriam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you, and welcome everyone also from my side. My name is Miriam Badino. I coordinate the Urban Transition Mission, which is aims at mobilizing different actors and different efforts to accelerate the transition at the global level of cities towards net zero. We aim, can please go to the next slide? The Urban Transition Mission in a snapshot is given in this slide. We aim, we work already with 97 cities, ambitious cities worldwide. We started with 48 last year, among which Turku is on the line. And then we added another 48 in the last last COP. And we are waiting for another additional 150 cities. So you're welcome to scan the code and join if you're not in our family yet. And we can support the cities to broker solutions and knowledge, and we aim really at enabling cities to test and pilot innovative solutions and approaches so that we can together accelerate and find a way and a framework that can accelerate the transition globally. In the next, we also aim at having holistic transition globally. And in this slide, I don't want to go into the detail of this, but you see the snapshot of the results of the first year, where I mentioned that it's global transition, for example, but of course we had to broker the knowledge starting from some point. So you will see that there is 7 clusters that are living in the UTMC platform, and some concrete results that you see here are also, for example, the support of the first 48 cities to reach their potential reduction on GHG emission event that was flagged in their GHG emission inventory, that is equivalent of 3 million round trip flights. So 3 million people having round trip flight from Miami to Newcastle, which is really amazing. We work with a lot of partners, and we are supported by the UTMC, which is a project that you can see in the next slide, supported by the European Commission, which is one of the 3 co-leads of the Urban Transition Mission, together with the Global Covenant of Mayors and JPI Urban Europe. And thanks to this project, you can access a global community platform. So not only a platform, but also a place where you can when you can find a learning community, connect with other cities at the international level, and find synergies with them and with other partners. So you find knowledge. You find also a framework that helps you navigate this knowledge in a focused way, and international exchange and a space where you can showcase your activities, and you also learn from others and replicate, get inspired from others. If you go to the next slide, you can also see what does it mean in practice. So first of all, the platform where we are in this moment. So you're already there. And that's great. We welcome you to really go check the different working groups and identify the ones that are the most priority for you or all of them, and engage in the discussion, share your experience. And you can also find case studies that are being developed by the project. And you can also raise your hand to share your case study, of course. You find since few weeks actually a funding and finance help desk that supports you access the best financing opportunities, and regional events, both so regional and so in person and online events, capacity building and peer-to-peer exchanges like today. So plenty of opportunities to engage there. And that's it. Then there is a next slide where you can just see a snapshot of the visual snapshot of what you can see. For example, the different profiles of the cities, and also the different resources that you can go and search to advance in your climate neutral urban transition. So we welcome again to you to engage there, and also I will share in the chat the link where you can join the Urban Transition Mission if you're not with us yet. Thank you, and back to you, Bart.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for all the information you provided. I'm pretty sure it was really engaging for all those city representatives who haven't been able to join the mission yet, but I'm pretty sure they will be very interested to join and experience from the closer. To join the all the benefits that the mission offers. Now we mentioned before the practical implementation guide, and we explained that we are working on it. Now we want to bring some highlights from this implementation guide, and here I invite Alina, our colleague, to share some of the highlights from the document, and I would highly encourage everyone to provide any feedback on the document and on whatever is being presented here. Alina, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart. So hello, everyone. I'm Alina Mures. I'm junior expert in sustainable energy system team at the ICLE European Secretariat. So the guide we are showcasing today, showcasing the main topics about today, is dedicated to understand how cities can implement offsetting and what are the main guiding principles that cities could adopt in order to make informed decisions. So it will also briefly discuss the role of the compliance and voluntary markets, and the non-market approach currently being discussed at UN level. It will provide some examples of how this is being treated or is being discussed within cities. The examples of the guide are, in this case, the city of Turku, the city of Bogota and Melbourne, that will briefly explain what are doing. It will also be dedicated into explain a bit what are the main pathways or approaches cities could take in terms of maybe either developing a project, a carbon sink project, for instance, or use carbon credits. Although this is not always the good case. And it will also explain a bit the types of offsets in terms of natural and technological solutions that cities could implement, depending, of course, on the context and on the situation of each city. Lastly, in the guide, we aim also to develop kind of an action strategy for the cities. And to do that, we held interviews indeed with the cities that are presented here today to try to understand what are the main steps of this action strategy. The guide is starting with the definition adopted at an international level at the UN by the UNFCCC that defines offsetting as the climate action that enables individuals and organizations to compensate for the emissions they cannot avoid by supporting worthy projects to reduce emissions somewhere else. And the other main definition from which we have started the guide is the one provided in the 6th assessment report of the IPCC. What that defines offsetting as a reduction, avoidance, or removal of a unit of emission of greenhouse gas emission by one entity purchased by another entity to counterbalance a unit of emissions or a unit of greenhouse gas emission by that other entity. Starting from so why did we focus on this? Because offsetting could play a meaningful role in supporting cities to accelerate the pathway towards carbon neutrality by providing a means to address emissions in hard-to-abate sectors and in heavy industrial sectors like cement and steel, for instance, waste treatment. It also could facilitate accelerating transition to sustainable energy, supporting projects in relation to renewable energy. It could support the achievement of sustainable development. For instance, if projects are dedicated to the development of clean cook stoves in different parts of the world, this is also then accompanied by different co-benefits like community empowerment, for instance. And lastly, it could also facilitate raising awareness, funding, and it can set a positive example. However, for offsetting to work, let's say, this should be considered only as a last resource. Cities anyway have first to focus on drastically reduce and mitigate the emissions, diverse, repurpose, and reinvest their resources towards green energy and any solution that would allow locally to mitigate emissions, and only, as mentioned, only as a last resource to offset those emissions that cannot be immediately removed or reduced. In the guide, we are also trying to identify those guiding principles that we can support cities to make the best choices, let's say. And for the moment, we have individualized 4, but we're still working on them. And this event is also, from this point of view, is also helping us in understanding what can best work for a city. The first guide would be prioritizing emission reductions first, as mentioned before. The second is still limiting the use of offsetting to avoid greenwashing or focusing on the wrong purpose, let's say. The third one would be only focus on high quality offsets, those that ensure carbon removal that is permanent and additional. And the fourth principle would be ensure transparency and accountability, and therefore using platform for showcasing the achievement of the targets that the city is aiming to achieve. I think that's all from my side from the moment. These are the main steps of the guide, but then of course, as Bart said, we would be more than happy to gain more knowledge from what you are doing and what is working at the city level. I hope the discussion that we will have now with Bogota and Turku could also support more. Bart, I think that's all from my side. Over to you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Alina. This is, I think, on the very short time we had dedicated to this was really enlightening. And I think we will give a chance for people to provide any comments or any feedback that they might have. Now, we are back to our case studies, and we would be very delighted to introduce our first speakers, representatives from the city. And maybe if you go to the next slide, we have the representatives from the city of Turku, Misa Tuomola and Mika Merotoja. I guess, Mika, you will be presenting this time?
Yes, I will be presenting. So, hello, my name is Mika Merotoja and I work as senior specialist for city of Turku in climate team, and my colleague Misa Tuomola is also here, but he'll have to leave early, so I'll present our slides. So, next slide, please. So, first, city of Turku, it's the oldest city in Finland, a former capital of Finland, but nowadays the 6th largest city in Finland with approximately 200,000 inhabitants. So it's a big city in Finland, but in global context, of course, middle-sized city. And our climate target is to become carbon neutral in 2029, which is the 800-year anniversary of our city. And we have had a climate plan already for 15 years now and have managed to reduce already more than 60% of our emissions. So we have been approaching the target well, but there is still a lot to do. And of course, the hardest parts are ahead. And our target for carbon neutrality means that at least 90% of emissions have to be reduced, and the rest will be compensated either by local sinks or other means of compensation. So next slide, please. And the main emission reductions we have managed to get this far are mainly due to the energy transition in the city, but the transport sector is nowadays the biggest share of emissions, and that is why we need to offset some emissions, because our ambitious target means that carbon neutrality will be reached only in 5 years from now, and some, at least traffic emissions, are still remaining here. And regarding the offsetting methods, we are open to basically all the solutions, and we know there is no one magic solution, and we need various solutions, but we have been mainly focusing on nature-based solutions and local solutions. That means, for example, afforestation, but we are constantly seeking also other ways to compensate our emissions. And city of Turku is a big landowner in the area. We own approximately 5,000 hectares of forests, for example, and that's why we have been working with them for a couple of years now, and we are, for example, applying continuous cover forestry in our lands, and the carbon net sink of our forests is assessed annually nowadays. And I have to say that operational environment is a little bit challenged in Finland, because there are no clear guidelines for municipal level compensation in Finland. We have guidelines for private companies nowadays. The Ministry of Environment in Finland have published guidelines for private companies, but there are still many things that are not so clear for the municipalities. And that's why we are working with state research organizations, for example, in the Kuntanielu project, and we try to tackle these challenges. And this project aims at promoting the land use sector based carbon sinks. And another approach, which is very important also in our area, is that we try to get the stakeholders involved in this increasing of the local sinks. That's because, for example, the land owning is very fragmented in Finland. There are, if I remember correctly, 300,000 forest owners, for example, in Finland. And in Turku, the situation has been such that city-owned forests are now carbon sinks, but the private land is the emission source. And so we need to have also private landowners involved, and also private companies. And we have been working closely with the city group companies, and many companies have done good things. For example, our regional water company owns land, and they have established nature reservation areas on their land. And for example, the University of Turku has established a foundation where they are trying to increase the carbon sink of the forest, and so on. But also private companies like the medical company Bayer has bought some forests to compensate their emissions. And so that is important to get more and more private people and companies involved in this work. But that's shortly what we have been doing in Turku. So thanks a lot, and back to Bart.
Thank you so much, Mika. It was really interesting to hear about the city of Turku, the measures, and all the actions you've taken. It's particularly interesting to hear about the involvement of private companies and utility companies in particular. As a matter of fact, well, I'll open the floor for question, and then maybe I'll pose one myself. So please, if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it on the chat. I'll give you the floor now. Maybe while others try to put something together, again, I was really interested to hear your thoughts about the collaboration with the utility companies, like you mentioned the water company, but also energy company or other companies that work with the city.
Yes, we own our energy company, which has been very beneficial in the emission reduction part, but also in increasing the things. We have collaborated with our energy company, for example, planting trees in some areas, and also have projects where we have in the same time employed young people, and so there are multiple benefits, shared benefits for shared information, and benefits to biodiversity, of course, as well. But also other companies like the Turku University of Applied Sciences, they have now decided to invest money for carbon sinks, and there are many others also who are interested to join this. And this is also one challenge there, that for the companies the rules are quite strict, that what kind of claims they can make based on these kinds of projects, and so but still many companies are interested to get involved in the city's climate actions.
That's just fantastic. Thanks again, Mika. And since I don't see any other questions, I suggest we take a long virtual trip to city of Bogota. And here is Ricardo, who's keen on showing us their actions and whatever they're taking to make the world a better place, right?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ricardo Delgado. I work at the Secretariat Environment of Bogota. Next slide, please. Just for context, I would like to mention that in Colombia, in 2018, the country emitted hazardous net emissions of 279 million tons of CO2, whilst in the same period, Bogota emitted 4.1% of national emissions, which was 11.5 million tons, having roughly 8 million people living in the city, where in the country we are more or less around 52 million people. So we concentrate a high share of the population, not a high share of emissions, but this is mainly because the emissions, most of the emissions in Colombia comes from deforestation. At least half of the emissions comes from deforestation. Next slide, please. Whilst in Bogota, most of the emissions comes from the use of energy in transportation and buildings. which make 4/5 of the total emissions in the city, and the remaining emissions are from solid waste disposal and domestic wastewater, with a small participation of AFOLU, but producing net absorptions in the city boundaries. So next slide, please. To tackle climate change, Bogota has two big instruments. On one hand, next slide, please. The agreement 790 from 2020 from the City Council, which declares the climate emergency and calls for taking urgent actions in the city for mitigating, mainly for mitigating climate change. And then the next slide. The city developed and adopted a climate action public policy that defines the roadmap for the city to be carbon neutral by 2050, but also for the city to be adapted and climate resilient by the same period. This climate action public policy horizon is from 2023, and it has an implementation plan that goes up to 2050. And every new administration has to take into consideration the mandates and the products and results expected in that roadmap contained in the climate action public policy. So next slide, please. This is the business as usual emissions that the city, the scenario that the city built in 2020. And as you can see here, we were expecting to almost double or more than double our emissions in 2050 if nothing was in place for mitigating climate change actively in the city. This is because the city is still increasing its population, increasing its income, reducing its poverty levels, and the economic activity of the city is also growing. So next slide, please. The city, next, explored different options for reducing the GHG emissions, and these are the colors that you see here. There are different actions. I'm sorry, the plot is in Spanish, but each color is a different action that the city is planning to undertake to reduce the emissions from the business as usual scenario to the gold trajectory, which is the dashed line at the bottom. You can see that in 2050, there are some emissions that we are still not sure how to mitigate, like the blank space. That's because at the moment when we did this analysis, we were having like the most ambition but credible values for penetration of new technologies, for changes in behaviors of inhabitants. We were just assuming the implementation of technology that we have more or less some certainty that will be available in the future. But these remaining emissions, the city is expecting to fill that gap by increasing the ambition of the current measures, by increasing the level of behavioral changing, by introducing new technologies that were not taken into account in the first assessment for the modeling assessment. And also, we are thinking in exploring the options of participating in carbon markets or using carbon offset credits from other places to be used to accomplish the goal of the city after doing all the tasks that I mentioned. We are more or less certain that for wastewater and waste management, there will not be still a 100% reduction technology. So we know that certainly that we know that in the future, the city will not be able to have zero emissions. So we will need some kind of absorptions or carbon offsetting by at least 2050. But if you can see back in 2030 and 2024 that like the mitigation actions and the goal are pretty close. So next slide, please. And next slide, please. Again. This plot shows the progress towards the achievement of the goals of the city. The green line is the business as usual scenario that I mentioned before. The blue line is the goals trajectory, and the bars are the historical data for the emission behavior in the city. Our inventory has a 2 years gap between the reported and the report date. But the first goal was to reduce 15% emissions by the end of the past administration, that was 2023. So we already know that we reduced 23% in 2022, and we are expecting to fill that goal when we have the results from the inventory. This administration, in line with the expectations and the goals from the public policy of climate action, has set a goal of reducing 30% its emissions by 2027. And as I mentioned before, there is no expectation of participating or purchasing or using carbon credits to accomplish nor the goal in 2024, nor the goal in 2027, or the goal in 2030. But later it could be an option. So next one. We cannot use the carbon credits because, next slide please, because we already have some information of the mitigation action that might lead the city to reduce its emissions, and also because at this moment the city cannot allocate budget for doing carbon offsetting beyond what it is currently doing by the Secretary of Environment of planting trees for regreening the city within the city boundaries. But in the climate action policy, the Treasury Secretariat has some products that are related basically with exploring the options for financing the climate policy action plan, for diagnosing the development of a climate budget in Bogota. The climate budget might enable the city to invest in carbon offsetting or in activities for just for acquiring carbon credits. And so the city is moving in that direction. Next slide, please. I have three final remarks. The first one is the city and population in the city and private sector and stakeholders need to be advised of the requirement to avoid selling credits for mitigation in the city, because we used to be part of the non-Annex 1 Kyoto Protocol countries, and then our mitigation could be part of the MDL system. Nowadays, Colombia and the city has their own mitigation commitments, so we cannot just sell our local mitigations, because that will put in danger of do not accomplish our goals. So this is critical, because both in the city level, like the government of the city, and also in the private companies, there is still this temptation of selling the credits. So next slide, please. As I mentioned before, we foresee the need to use compensations or participating in carbon markets to offset residual emissions. This is a different view from Bogota. Everybody's thinking, as I mentioned before, in selling the carbon credits. We are start talking with the administration to make the idea that if the city is going to participate in the carbon market, it will be most likely to be a purchaser of carbon credits or supporting offsets from the public level, but also it will raise another need related with the third point from the private sector. And in that case, one might anticipate also that investing in protecting or reforestating forests, jungles, and watersheds that provides environmental services to the city and provides water to the city will be one of the key investments or key sources for offset to be supported by the city. Next one. And finally, the country has a commitment to develop and adopt sectoral carbon budgets, and is building its version of an emission trading scheme. The city needs to be aligned with those initiatives, and also, and here's where we don't know yet how to deal with that, the private sector is part of each of the sectors that will be tied by the carbon budgets. So the energy companies will be tied to the mining and energy sector budget, and the transportation sector will be part of the Ministry of Transport budget, and so on and so on. Therefore, the city needs to see how the private accomplish of the sectoral national budgets are to be aligned with the local districtal goals for mitigation, and how the participation of the stakeholders located in Bogota within the ETS do not jeopardize the mitigations reached in the city in order to make the city able to reach its climate goals. So that's all that I wanted to share with you today. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thanks a lot, Ricardo. This is really interesting information. I think everybody on a call and cities who will have a chance to watch this recording will find it very useful, because it's as we mentioned before, the 3 cities we were lucky to be able to select are at different stages. So I think there is information for everyone around the globe to pick up at depending on at what stage they're at. I will open the floor now for any questions. Please, again, feel free to write it down or raise your hand. And if not, then I have one, which is, it caught my eye. There was one slide that you mentioned that if we do not do anything in 30 years in Bogota, we will double the GHG emissions. My question to you is, how does that kind of information or will help the city push the agenda towards the climate action? As well as I've seen a lot of, you just presented a lot of data. How does the data itself help you as a tool, help you push the action towards the climate action?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, this analysis started before 2020, and 2020, as you might know, was the deadline for updating the NDCs according to the Paris Agreement. So we have all this data, the characterization for the city, and the city adopted the 50% reduction objective before the country defined its NDC. And the country's NDC is to reduce 51% emissions by 2030 with regards with the business as usual. So we like to think that the city has kind of impact by supporting the increasing the ambition of the country, by showing that there is a clear commitment of the largest city in the country. Therefore, the government has the ability to increase beyond its own calculations the ambition of the Colombian NDC. The second thing is all the data we have enable us as environmental secretary to talk with all the other secretaries from the city administration, to engage them and to accept that the commitments that were assigned to everyone in the public policy. So, for instance, the Secretary of Treasury that I mentioned before, they were keen to engage in doing those studies because they realized that the city will need to do something outside of the box, something new with regards with the climate action and the management of the budget if we really want to be carbon neutral in 2050. So all the data help us to discuss with the technicals from the other sectors, like Secretary of Mobility, the company, the utility company for water supply, and so on.
Great that you just mentioned them, because my follow-on question is on climate financing, and I saw in your slide that you had some action on that, and I would love to hear a little bit more, like in general, but specifically Bogota, how much you could expect from the state government to support any climate action, or is it on cities only?
No, actually, we rely a lot on the national action. For instance, our power supply relies on the national grid. So we rely on the government fully decarbonizing the national grid power supply, which it's quite hard because the renewable share of our electricity in Colombia often is above 80%. So we need, but the city has the ability to mobilize the public agenda in order to foster or to support the increasing the ambition. For instance, in the decarbonization of electricity, the city is using national laws for fostering the use of electric vehicles and tax credits for the city. And what the city is doing is more related with developing the strategies for active mobility, for public mobility, for enabling the use of distributed power generation within the city boundaries and things like that. So there is a synergy between what the city relies from this national level, but at the same time, the city has the ability to influence somehow the ambition of the national level. And other cities as well. Bogota is kind of an example for many actions that has historically been in place for our cities in Colombia.
Great. Thanks again, Ricardo. It was really nice. Thanks. Now, our final case study is on the opposite of the globe. So the city of Melbourne. Nicholas couldn't join us today or tonight or this afternoon, or this morning for Ricardo. But we have Bea from our team who has kindly volunteered to cover what Nicholas had provided during our initial interview. So Bea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bart. Hi, everyone. I'm Beatrice Ruggero, and I'm a project assistant at ICLE Europe, as Bart just mentioned. So next slide, please. Well, the information that we are going to provide now are based on the interview we had with Nicolas Carazzo, Energy Innovation and Carbon Accountant for the City of Melbourne. So the City of Melbourne at organizational level was certified carbon neutral by the Australian federal government in 2012. And in the year 2022-2023, the city accounted for 12,000 tons of residual emissions, deriving mainly from organizational transport, waste disposal, and the city's contractor operations. So in order to offset these emissions, the city purchases carbon credits on the voluntary market. Regarding the geographical scope of the projects, the priority is given to national level projects. But in case these are not available, the city also purchases credits which are originated from international projects. In any case, they always try to make sure that the associated co-benefits of the credits purchased support local and indigenous communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so when it comes to selecting the projects, the city adopts the following criteria. First of all, it makes sure that the project aligns with the Oxford Principle for Carbon Offset Purchasing, meaning additionality, permanence, integrity are respected. It also verifies that co-benefits produced by the project align with the UN SDGs. It always prioritizes nature-based and local projects. And lastly, it makes sure also that the information provided by the broker on the project in terms, for example, of details and related to the effects that the project itself generates are transparent and accurate. And the City of Melbourne also purchases credits that are verified by third parties. So in particular, it relies on the Verra and Gold Standard certification schemes. The city has met some challenges in the purchase and implementation of carbon credits, and it is trying to deal with them. But this is all from our side. This was just a glimpse of what the city is doing. So if you have any questions or you are keen to know more about the strategies and measures that they're implementing, you can write your questions in the chat and we are happy to forward them to Nicolas and follow up with you via email to provide the answers. So that's it. Thank you. And I go back to Bart.
Thanks a lot, Bea. I think this was very useful on bringing the perspectives again from another city, or pretty much on the other side of the globe, who has already done some projects and some offsetting actions, and I think everyone would benefit from their cases as well. Now we will shift the gears now a bit, and we will have the next session, the next part of the session on some questions and answers. We will try to get everyone involved. So everyone, please be ready to contribute via the Mentimeter, and maybe Alina or Bea will share the screen, and then we will pose the first question. Yep. And I see Bea has already shared the Mentimeter link. So please click on the link, put the code, and be ready to answer or to put a keyword. All we are looking for everyone to see how we understand and what we think of that. So I see there is some action. Okay. Promote net zero projects, hard-to-abate sectors, enable net zero, carbon neutrality, invest in sustainability. Okay, all these points on why should a city consider carbon offsetting. Anybody else before we move to the next question? Okay, maybe we give a few more seconds. Co-benefits, regreening cities. Yep. It's populating quite well. Maybe we move to the next one. And thanks to everyone for contributing. Okay. Which are the misconceptions, concerns, and limitations of carbon offsetting? I can think of a few at least. Long-term solution, yeah. NBS only, yes. Costly, time-consuming, technology only. Those are very interesting points. Okay, Additionality. Business, yeah. Cool. I think a few more seconds and we will have to close because we're pretty much almost over with our session and we still have. Yeah, thanks everyone for sending your feedback on this. And maybe, yeah, we close this and we go back to the slides as we have to go. All right. Can we start the slides now? Fantastic. And Alina will talk a little bit about the next steps. So Alina, please.
Yeah, thank you. So very quickly, the implementation guide is part of a broader work that we have been doing together with our partners in the UTMC project. This implies the analysis of different approaches and methodologies that could support to quick up the process of transition to of cities. We also analyzed the methodology on the mission-oriented approach in the previous work that was done last year. This year we are focusing on carbon offsetting for the reasons we have mentioned before. We have interviewed the cities to understand how they're implementing the approach at the local level, and based on the information collected so far, we planned this peer-to-peer exchange to gain more insights from you, and the overall knowledge gained so far will feed into this practical implementation guide that will be finalized by the end of June, more or less, and that will be made available on the UTMC portal. We will follow up via email with all the information that were showcased today. And if you need any kind of information or if you wish to provide feedback, feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to respond. And maybe, yeah, if you wish, let's use the UTMC app, as this is quite a quicker approach to interact, hopefully. That's all from my side, but if you have any questions, please let us know.
Great. Thank you, Alina. And yes, we encourage everyone to use the platform, the UTMC platform, as well as what Miriam has kindly included in the chat is the Urban Transition Mission website, where there's loads of information about the Urban Transition Mission, as well as all the projects and the list of cities that join. So maybe you will get inspired and you will push your mayor or city administration to join the mission. And here, if no one else has anything to add, I once again want to voice my sincere appreciation to our amazing speakers for sharing their knowledge and increasing our collective passion for climate change. So let's keep the conversation going and seek possibilities of carbon offsetting in each respective cities and communities. Many thanks again, and until next time, have a very nice day, night, evening, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Have a nice day, morning, evening.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.